Hello world, here I am, your girl Charles B, and I'm with my wonderful neighbor, the lovely lady Myna Hague Bradshaw. Well, our first talking point before we say anything, as you see, we're colorful. I didn't even know what she was gonna wear. I didn't know what I was gonna wear, and I was gonna change. I'm like, maybe I should be neutral, but hey, we're Caribbean people, we're colorful.
That's what I say.
Her words exactly. So thanks for joining us. This is what I call talking all that jazz, because some of you may not know, but you should know, the whole world should know that Myna is a jazz musician. Now the irony of it is that I knew Myna Hague before I actually really knew Myna Hague. Like, I'd never met her, but I knew her from her singing, her vocal stylings. You know, you see pictures of her, you hear of her in the media and the news. But years ago I had a school friend, Vanessa Abrahams, now Abrahams John, and she had told me all along that, you know, she had a sister named Myna. I just never connected the two. Anyway, when I attended Vanessa's wedding, I'm thinking, man, Vanessa really well connected, you know, because she have Myna Hague singing at our wedding. And of course, you know, Myna sang, the first time ever I saw your face. And I was just like, my heart just out my chest. Because I'm a music girl, you know, I grew up around music. My father would play music every Saturday in the house. My mom also really loved music, and Roberta Flack was one of her favorites. So at that moment, it was like a eureka moment for me, because I'm like, oh my gosh, Myna Hague is Vanessa's sister. Anyway, years later, I get the privilege and honor of having Myna as my neighbor. So another day I go outside and I'm doing something and I see her and I'm thinking, what are you doing here? And she's like, I'm your neighbor. So welcome to my neighbor, the lovely lady Myna Hague Bradshaw.
I'm so happy to be your neighbor.
So we are here and we're talking all that jazz. Earlier this year, my birthday, September, we went out to celebrate, you know, just a little eats and greets. You know, I had Myna as my neighbor to come, another good mummy sister friend of mine that I call her. She's like a spiritual mentor. She's everything. She's a big sister mummy friend, Charmaine, and another close sister of mine, Jennifer. So we went out and, you know, conversation started to spark, and the question came up to Myna as to how did you become a jazz singer? So why don't you share with us, how did you become a jazz singer? Because Jamaica, the land of reggae, and even ska, rock steady. So why jazz?
Because I'm of that generation that from which jazz was the popular music of the day. Jamaica's cultural life didn't start with reggae,
right,
or ska, or rock steady, you know. And there were a whole lot of people who came before that, for whom live dance music and the basis of which was jazz was the popular music of the day. So I became a jazz singer because when I decided that I wanted to be a singer, when I decided that I wanted to be a musician, I looked to the top of the trade to position myself. I didn't want to be a pop singer. I remember when I got into the profession, I was growing up in the UK actually, because I come from that generation of migrants, of mothers who migrated to the United Kingdom in the 60s. And so I grew up in the UK and started my career in the UK.
Okay.
And everything was open, you know, every kind of possibility was available. And so when I decided that I wanted to be a singer, and I started to register with various agents, I remember one agent booking me to go to perform at a pop show.
Yes.
And I sang an Aretha Franklin. I don't remember which one it was now. But I so disliked the atmosphere.
Okay.
The crowd and the, you know, I decided, well, it was a way to find out what I really liked and what I really wanted, and I decided that was not for me.
Okay.
And so I looked to the singers of color, who were mostly Americans at the time. You know, Lena Horne, Sarah Vaughan,
some heavy hitters.
Well, they were the top of the profession. They were the top of the profession, and so I looked to them for role models,
right,
to see what I liked, what I wanted to be like, right. You know. And so I created my personality, my artistic personality, and my artistic presentations on those ladies, you know. And then in the UK we developed Cleo Lane and Shirley Bassey, and they were the two British singers who were at the top of the game, the profession at the time. And so that was where I positioned myself. And so jazz as popular music was popular music, but it was the best of popular music. It was the top of the profession. You could either be a classical singer or a jazz singer,
right?
You know.
Well,
and I didn't want to be a pop singer because I did not want to be in that atmosphere.
Right.
I like the idea of the concert stage.
Right.
So you have a formal setting where a formal audience is there, and you are formally dressed and you are formally presented with an orchestra, or at least, you know, a kind of very well structured accompaniment, and that's what I liked, and that is what I still like, and that is what I still do. I do not see myself as a pop singer. People ask me, so you don't sing anything else? Yes, I sing other things, but I always frame the other things that I sing in that same kind of space. I sing reggae songs, but I always treat every song that I sing, I treat it as a piece of poetry,
right,
to be interpreted and to be expressed. And even if the rhythm is reggae or the rhythm is ska or whatever, or you know, Latin, whatever, you still position it in a kind of way so that it has a formal frame. I like that is what I like.
Well, we know that being Caribbean, you know, our parents and our heritage is like, you know, the expectation is for everybody to be a doctor, lawyer, Indian chief. Like, we don't celebrate the arts, we don't celebrate that aspect of life or education. What was the response of your parents at the time when you said you wanted to be a jazz singer?
Well, I didn't say I wanted to be a jazz singer, I just wanted to be a singer. My mother was quite distressed. and even years later, cousins looked at me and said, "You really like that? Right. You really want that? What is wrong with this child?"
Right.
So my motivation was always to not fail.
Failure is not an option.
Failure was not an option, because if I failed, then they would all be right. They would all have been correct in saying that this was a bad choice.
Yes.
So my motivation was always not to fail and not to be an embarrassment to my family.
Got you.
Yeah.
I think I can so relate to that, because the same as myself growing up, initially I was going to be a pediatrician, and you know, when I switched gears to go into art, my father was not having that. And it was the same thing in my life. I was like, you know, I would have to succeed at any cost, and you know, they'd ascribe to a starving artist.
Yes.
That wasn't part of the plan at all. So you succeed at any means necessary. Yes. You do whatever it takes to survive.
You have to. Not just to survive,
but to thrive, to succeed and thrive. Exactly. Yes. If I was to jump forward to now, like for your musical journey that you have gone through, what would you tell like a young musician now? Because I think there's still a bit of a stigma in being a creative. So what would you tell a young musician now, seeing you've gone through this journey?
To be clear about what you really want. To be clear, you know, to be absolutely clear about what you really want. And then, as I said, to know that failure is not an option. Those two things are important, because if you are wishy-washy about it,
yes.
If you're not sure, if you're only drawn to it because your friends are doing it, or you see somebody else doing it and it looks like fun, if that is the way that you're going to go at it, then you are going to fail.
Yes.
You yourself have to be absolutely clear that this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be.
Right.
This is how I see myself. And when I'm old, I still want to be doing this.
Right.
You know, so you're clear. And then you have to know that you cannot fail. You cannot fail. And so you work at it. You acquire all the skills that you think you are going to need in order to do it well and to do it properly. You look for opportunities. You yourself, you don't sit there waiting for somebody to come to you. You go looking for the opportunities.
You make the opportunities.
You make them, you create them, you find the way. There's not a magazine, a weekly paper that used to come out in the UK called The Stage, and it was the show business paper that came out every weekend, and it had all the ads where the auditions were going to be, for whether it was for theatre, for film, for music, for shows. All the ads were there for the auditions, where the auditions were going to be, who was working where, who was doing what. And this was your absolute, you had to buy the stage every Friday, and you read it, and to see what was happening, and go to these auditions.
That was your connection to what was happening at the time.
Connection to show business, to be in show business, to just be in the business,
right?
And to know what was going on, and so I would just turn up at the auditions,
right?
Because even going to an audition was a way to practice. You could practice singing in front of somebody.
Of course.
Whether you got the job or not.
You go and sing your heart out.
The way it was to practice.
Right.
And so you go to the music store and you buy the songs. You hear songs on the radio that you like, and you go to the music store and you buy the music sheet, and you learn it. I used to get 5 shillings a week for my pocket money.
5 shillings.
Yes, man. And I save up my pocket money, because my pocket money, my mother was not encouraging me in this nonsense.
Right.
So I saved up my pocket money, and I used my pocket money to pay for my own music lessons.
Right.
And my dance lessons, and my acting lessons, and everything else. I saved up my pocket money, and then I got myself a Saturday job.
Okay.
Which earned me 25 shillings.
Oh, wow. So it sounds like you were
I took open bank account.
Bank account.
So much money, I didn't know what to do with it. And took care of what I thought was important, to learn, to grow, to get the skills that I was going to need. And then when my mom saw that I was serious, she said, okay. I would tell her that I have this audition to go to, and so on. She says, and she would show up. She would leave her job and show up at the audition. And I remember one audition, she showed up with a pot of yogurt. And something else to eat, and she said, "No, you don't have anything to eat, So I come.
Still a mother, right?
Yes,
always a mother.
And so you have to. That my anything that I have to say to a young person. It was so then, it is so now.
Right.
You have to know that this is what you want. You can't just be doing it because you're following your friend.
Right.
Because
So
you
have
can
to have a
waste
passion.
time.
Yes.
You can waste a lot of time doing that.
Right.
Because if the friend fail, then what do you have?
Right.
You have to know for yourself that this is what you want.
Right.
And so when your parents are getting on your case and then vexed about it, and they are worried for you, because don't forget, especially being a singer,
Yes.
you're going to be performing at night.
Of course.
And no parent, no mother wants her
child out in the streets at night.
on street at night.
Yes.
So they are worried for you. They're concerned about what's going to happen. They're concerned that you're going to mash up and all of that. So you have to know that your parents are not objecting because they don't want you to do it. They're objecting because they are worried for you.
Right.
They're objecting because they don't see the future. They don't see how it can be. They don't see how it can
to
be,
you. Right.
How your life is going to look.
Right.
And parents are always wanting the best for their children. So that is one of the reasons why you have to know that you can't fail. You have to know that you can't fail. You mustn't fail.
Right.
Because all your parents' hopes and dreams and wishes for you is going to go down the drain if you fail.
Right. So speaking of the whole color issue then, what was that like in the 60s in England at that time? Like, do you think that there was a big struggle then as there is now? Because I think it's pretty evident sometimes.
It is there more now, because what has happened now is that there is such a strong and powerful black community that the white community feels threatened.
Right.
So in the 60s and 70s, when there were a smaller number of persons of color living in the UK and in Europe generally, we were not a threat.
Okay.
We were not seen as a threat. Of course there was racism, but it wasn't so open and so aggressive as it is now. And so, there was space. There was a lot more space for you to move and for you to maneuver. And when I got my first West End engagement, I was 17, 18 when I got my first West End engagement. No young person of color could get into, a West End gig in those days.
So how did you get in?
Well, exactly. It seemed impossible. But, I auditioned.
Right.
And there was this new restaurant that was opening up, and it was on 2 floors, and the upstairs was going to be the cabaret room. And they had engaged this musical director, And I went for the audition, and I opened with a song called On a Clear Day.
Okay.
And the piano player was a jazz man.
Okay.
And I was the only person that was singing anything that he wanted to hear.
Oh,
so
nice.
he gave me the job right on the spot. He gave me the job, and I knew 3 songs.
Okay.
I knew 3 songs. And when I got the job, and I had 1 week
Yes.
to get ready.
Yes.
And my pianist too, because I had booked, I always had a pianist that I paid. I booked a studio
Right.
in the West End to go and do my rehearsals and my practice time.
Yes.
And so I called my practice piano player and said to him, you know, I have this job, can you help? And he said, come, bring all the music sheets that you have and come, and we can put something together. And so I went, and for a week I just created my act.
Yes.
And my dear mother made my gowns.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
It's always good to have that in your corner, someone that can
ma'am.
stand, because you're
Yes.
always very elegant, very graceful.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
My mommy made my gowns, and my pianist, we worked together, we created the act. And I remember You've Lost That Loving Feeling was just on the charts at that time, and I included it in my repertoire, which I still sing it. And that was my first gig, and then it just grew from there, because somebody else who had a club was in the place that night and heard me and came backstage and said to me, I just opened a new club, would you like to perform there? And I said, yes. And so I took off, and within months after that, I was on my first European tour. I went to Austria soon after that for 3 months and so on, so yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we know you as Myna Hague Bradshaw, so speak to how you met Sonny Bradshaw, and maybe you can tell the folks for who don't know, because there's a lot of young people on the internet and stuff now, and just that I think they're not fully aware of our jazz history and the musical history of this country. So share with them how you met Sonny Bradshaw and who he was to you.
Well, I met Sonny Bradshaw. I came to Jamaica. I was living in the UK, of course, and I had been, and then I had also been living in Italy for a number of years. And the small artistic community, the small, West Indian, because everybody wasn't from Jamaica, artistic community in the UK included a very famous Jamaican actor named Charles Hyatt.
Right.
Another one named Barry Johnson. I don't think as many people knew Barry Johnson, but Barry Johnson and Charles Hyatt was in that community. And on my break, because I was working 3 shows a night, 6 nights a week,
Wow.
48 weeks a year out of 52.
That's a busy schedule.
It was. And I was home in London on my 2-month break, and connected, with my community, my artistic community. And Totlin Jackson was part of that group. And talking and so on, and Hyatt said to me, by the way, I'm going to Jamaica next month. I'm going to Jamaica to do some shows. Why I don't come and be on my show? You're not anything doing. You're not doing anything now. Come to Jamaica and be on my show, and get Jamaicans to know you, because they don't know you,
Right.
And I said, maybe, okay. And so the conversation went on to other things. And then about another week later, he called and he said, you're not coming to Jamaica. Come to Jamaica, I leave in such and such a date. Why I don't, get on a flight, you're not doing anything, you're sitting around here, right. Eating and getting fat, work. I said, it's an idea, why not? Why not? Because by that time, of course, my mother had returned to Jamaica.
Okay.
And I hadn't seen her for a while. So I thought, yeah, why not? And so I came to Jamaica to appear on Charles Hyatt's show that he was going to do at what turned out to be that hotel, which is no longer on Oxford Road. It is now moved to Knutsford Boulevard. And the band that was going to accompany him was the Sonny Bradshaw 7. So he took me to Bradshaw's home, and we met, and I told him what material I wanted to sing and so forth and all of that, and he said, okay, well, we're going to rehearse with Mr. Hyatt on this day and so on. So when I was staying in Ochias at my mom's, and I came into Kingston on the day, And I stayed at a friend's house. Not really a friend, a cousin of mine's house. And did the rehearsal and performed on the thing that evening. And then I was told that the band also played at New Kingston Hotel on a Sunday night, Sunday by Charles 7 on a Sunday evening. And I went. Charles said, "Come on, the band play good enough."
Right.
So I went and heard the band and was there. And that was basically how we met.
Right.
I did not stay in Jamaica. I was in Jamaica for about 6 weeks and then went back to London. But then, before I left, the owner of Studio One, Coxon Studio one of the great studios that created most of what has become known as Jamaican popular music.
Right.
We have family connections, and he got in touch with me and he said, why don't you come to Kingston and let's record you?
Right.
And I said, okay, I didn't understand at the time.
Right.
What was going to be the significance of that?
That was a turning point in your career.
But it was a turning point in terms of how I repositioned myself.
Right.
So I came to Kingston and we made the album. Because some of the material was from my own personal repertoire and some of it was what Coxon chose for me. And I made the album and then subsequently left and went back to Europe, back to my life.
Yeah.
But then I got a call, months later, I got a call from somebody I'd met in Jamaica and said, the hotels in Jamaica, they have, shows and stuff. And up there at what was then Playboy Club, there is a fabulous piano player up there named Cecil Lloyd. And they are looking for somebody like you to perform.
Right.
What do you think about, coming to Jamaica for the winter? You don't have to, be here the whole time. You can come for the winter and see how it goes.
Right.
And I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, it's something it would be a change.
Right.
And I had been missing my mom, and
it was a way to reconnect.
It was a way to reconnect. So I started that journey of coming to Jamaica in the winter. Doing a couple of hotels in the winter, and the musicians at that time were brilliant. The musicians in the hotels at that time were absolutely. They could read. You give them a big score, and they could just read and play, and it was terrific.
Right.
So I started doing that, and then I started to buck up on Sonny Bradshaw.
Right.
Because his band would come into some of these hotels on special occasions to play for groups and stuff. And I started bucking up with him over time. And then as I started to spend more and more time in Jamaica and less time in Europe, my whole focus began to shift.
Right.
To shift to Jamaica. And so I was spending, instead of spending 6 or 8 weeks in Jamaica and the rest of the year in Europe, it turned around.
Completely.
It turned around completely. So my career switched over. So sometimes, your life changes and you didn't plan it.
Right.
That was kind of what happened. And so one day, Bradshaw called me. I was in Otrius, and Bradshaw called and said, "You're working a lot in the hotels, and we have a musicians union here, ma'am. You have to join it."
Think you can just sneak in the back door,
I'm telling you. And I apologize because I'm a member of the union in the UK.
Right.
So I said, of course, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I came in, I joined the union, I paid up my dues and so on. And he said one day, I was at a union meeting.
Yes.
I'm a member, I'm entitled to go to a meeting, so I went to a union meeting, and based on various questions that I asked and various positions that I took about certain things, he said to me, we have annual general meeting coming up. Why don't you come to our annual general meeting and see if you don't want to be on the executive.
Okay, to join the board.
well, not the board so much, but the executive,
Okay.
you know, secretary and
Right.
this and that, and
Right.
assistant and so forth.
Yeah.
And so I came to the executive, the annual general meeting that year, and the secretary then was about to migrate, and so the secretary position became open, and Mr. Bradshaw said, "I am suggesting you put up yourself." He was very forceful that way,
Of course.
and I said, "Okay." And so I became secretary of the Musicians Union, and I was in that position for about 6 years. So after becoming secretary of the Musicians Union, he had the Jamaica Big Band was functional at that time, and he said to me at a meeting, he said, "You come from Europe with some arrangements, I understand." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, why don't you bring some of them and we have a look and see if there's anything in there that we can use for the big band." And like I was saying before, you have to know what you want.
Right.
And so even though working in Europe, I worked with smaller groups, you know, or a nightclub band was never more than 4 or 5 or 6. I always knew that I wanted to sing with a big band. I always knew that. I always saw that for myself.
Right.
And so I had already arranged to have an arranger. I'd already spoken to arrangers in Italy to write big band arrangements for me. So I had a trunk full of arrangements that I had never sung, but that I knew that I would one day want to sing them.
So you already had material stored up?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So did you write your own music?
No, I don't write.
You don't write?
I don't write. There's too much good music out there for me to be fooling around with my nonsense when there are great.
Let the writers write,
yes,
exactly.
Right, and the arrangers arrange.
Yes.
And so you said, bring some of what you have and let's have a look and see if we can't use some of it, you know, in the band. And I did that.
Okay.
And so he said, okay, I've picked a couple of things, and
Yeah.
the big band is going to be playing like next week or next month or wherever it was at it was the New Kingston Hotel in the Junkanoo Lounge.
All right. Good old days, I remember
And let's see if we can't play some of this material. And so it turned out that I got my first. I broke my ducks singing with the big band on the Sunny's baton for the first time at the Junkanoo Lounge, and met some of the great musicians like Dean Fraser and Desi Jones and so on that were in the band at the time and still are actually.
Right.
And that was how that kind of started. And so I became a member of the big band. I became one of the vocalists, well, the female vocalist in the band, because I don't think they had another female vocalist at that time.
How long were you the only female for?
I never saw another one after that.
Okay.
I never saw anything after that.
Was it that there was just not many female jazz singers at the time, or?
Yes, that was it. You're looking at the late 70s, going into the 80s, and by that time Jamaican popular music had changed. So the singers of my kind of voice and my kind of caliber had either migrated or come out of the business altogether, because there wasn't any work.
Right.
And so reggae music was on the rise. I don't remember who the male singer was at that time, but I remember that Bobby Smith came on board after that. The singer who was with the Sonny Bradshaw 7, I think sang sometimes, but nobody, there wasn't anybody around that actually knew the big band vocal repertoire.
Right.
You know?
Right.
The big band was an instrumental band. We played big band arrangements, big band dance arrangements from the 40s, and so on. And so there was no vocal, there were no vocalists. There was no music for the vocalists because the vocalists had left. You know, the vocalists that were part of that era had migrated out, left Jamaica. They had gone away from Jamaica because there was no work.
Right.
I was in a slightly different position because I had come from Europe. I had always worked, and I migrated into the tourism industry.
Right.
You know, which was on the up and up at that time. And whenever the winter season was over, I always had Europe to go back to. So I was always working.
Right.
So I was in a slightly different position. I come in at a kind of transition position, and then I held a post that only I was holding. There was no other female singers of that type and style around. They had all left the country.
Okay.
So I was in a kind of unique position to hold that. And so I was a singer with a big band, as I said. And most of the material that I was doing was material that I myself had brought from Europe with me.
Okay.
You know, and then Sonny began to write some arrangements for me around my voice.
Okay.
He began to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would you say that your involvement subsequent, you married Sonny Bradshaw, he became your husband. When did the whole Otrius Jazz Festival come about? Like,
Otrius Jazz Festival came about in 1991 after his own personal life had changed. The Sonny Bradshaw, because dancehall, not even reggae, wasn't so popular even then because dancehall was taking over.
right.
And so musicians of a certain caliber were not getting anywhere.
And this was in the 90s?
This is 1991.
91,
Yeah.
the beginning of the 90s.
Yeah, beginning of the 90s, dancehall had taken over.
Yeah.
Musicians, instrument playing musicians couldn't get anywhere. Trumpeters, saxophonists, trombone players,
Right.
musicians of a certain caliber, just there wasn't anywhere for them. The studios, in the recording studios, were making records. They were creating like a what they call rhythm, rhythm, and then any number of singers would come and sing on the one
rhythm. Right.
So the recording business changed.
Right.
Live performances changed.
Yeah.
Singing went out.
Okay.
And so, as still president of the Musicians Union, Sonny was always concerned about the industry.
Yes.
And he felt that something had to be done to keep musicians playing and to
Preserve the culture, to preserve the sound, the
and to
music.
keep music
Going,
alive,
yes,
just
to
keep
keep
live
live
music
music.
alive, because
Yes.
that was the motto of the Musicians Union. Let live music live. That was the
Okay.
motto of the Musicians Union. Let live music live. And so for him, anything that would keep live music alive, keep musicians who played instruments working and alive and functioning, was important. And so I remember him saying one evening, I want to start a jazz festival. I want to start a jazz festival because it would be a way
Yes.
to keep the music alive. And I said, well, I will help you.
Okay.
I'll help you. And so we picked Father's Day, because Father's Day was the one day when nothing was happening. Mother's Day was the big day. Father's Day
Always
was
celebrated, yes.
Yeah, Father's Day was just a date on the calendar. Nothing ever happened.
Yes.
And so we picked Father's Day. And I was still living in Otrius at the time. And I said, well, Otrius is a tourism town. And I think it could work there rather than Montego Bay, because Otrius is small enough for you to be able to control a situation.
Right.
Whereas Montego Bay, you don't know. But I was going to be in Otrius, and I said
Would have
I
been
could
easier
help.
logistics.
Easier logistically, and so on. So we picked Father's Day, and we decided that we would just do it for one day to test the waters. And he galvanized all of his musicians, and everybody came on board. There was no money to pay anybody, but everybody said, yes, man, we want to do this. We want to do this. And Radcliffe Butler, New Young Butler, they owned the restaurant and bar there, and Sonny himself owned an apartment at Cal. So we were coming. We went and had a look at it, and decided that would be a good place.
A good venue.
He lived there, so yes. And we saw on the Sunday we were coming back to Kingston, and we saw Radcliffe, and we blocked him with the car, and said, Radcliffe, we have to talk to you.
Ambush him.
They ambushed him, and we said, this is what we want to do. And he said, oh, that's wonderful. You can have the place. Have the place, man. That's great.
Nice.
And he went his way, and we went our way, and we organized it, and it was a humongous success.
Nice.
And so that was one day.
That was the birth of the Otrius Jazz Festival?
The birth of the Otrius Jazz Festival. It was called the Otrius Mini Jazz Festival that year.
Okay.
And so the following year, we planned for a whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah.
And then the year after that, we went to the entire week, Sunday to Sunday. And so it grew. And because Sonny, as a musician and a traveling musician who had contacts all over the Caribbean and all over the United States of America, and me with some in Europe, we were able to invite some of the top names in jazz to come to Jamaica. And they came because jazz was getting a beating all around the world at that point as well. You know, a lot of the jazz festivals were turning into pop festivals. And so jazz musicians everywhere were looking for places,
an outlet
as well. So they came, and because it was a musician who was running it, like themselves, they had a deep respect for Sonny because he was one of them. An appreciation of what he was doing. And so they were happy to come, and they were happy to come for reasonable rates. And we worked, we had an arrangement with what was the Jamaica Grand Hotel. It wasn't the Jamaica Grand at the time, it was Intercontinental. It was two of them. They hadn't been merged into one yet. And so we had an arrangement with the hotel, and between them and us, we were able to sell packages, and so they got people to come into the property. And so it worked. It worked for a long time. And so that was the beginning of Ocean Jazz Festival. That is how it started.
If I was to ask you to speak to the difference between, as you say, live music then and live music now, what would you say? What would you think is the greatest difference, if any at all?
There's a great deal of difference because so much of the music has become mechanized. So much of the music is not being played by live musicians playing. A lot of music is very
synthesized.
You know, you can have one keyboard and create all kinds of sounds on it. You can make a whole album, and all of the background, all of the music, apart from maybe the singer, is synthesized from a computer and from a one keyboard that has everything in it. And so that is really the difference.
Do you think that has watered down the music?
I wouldn't call it watered down, I would call it change.
It's change.
It's a change.
It's a change.
It's a change in how you approach music. The difference is though that this is the case in popular music, in the popular arena. That is what has happened. It has not happened so in classical music because it can't. It has not happened so in jazz because it can't. Because jazz by its very nature is live music being spontaneously created right there on the spot. You know? And so that has not happened in jazz, and it has not happened in classical music. But it has happened in popular music because popular music is constantly changing. It's constantly morphing into something else and something else and something else. And so the synthesized structure works very well for that. So I wouldn't call it watered down. I would just call it change. If you are, and so for me, a lot of, not, I wouldn't say a lot. Sometimes people call me and they want me to come and perform, and they don't understand that I don't sing on tracks. You know, I don't sing on tracks, and I never will. You know, not unless the track has been recorded. It is my track that I have created with live musicians, created live. And then but then I don't want to do it. I don't want to do that. I want to be able to create on the spot. And I can only do that if the musician is alive right there. And playing, you know. And he can draw from me and I can draw from him. So I don't sing on tracks and I don't want to. I don't want to. So I tell people, you will have to provide, if it's even just a piano player. Because I can do voice and piano quite easily. So I don't sing on tracks because I don't want to lose my ability to create
that spontaneity, like that spontaneous element.
I am a creative. I am a singer. You know, and every song that I sing has meaning, has the power to change a mood, a moment, sometimes alive, somebody can be sitting in your audience right there, ready to commit, kill themselves, and then hear you sing something important, and then change their mind.
Music is a universal language, so I would have to agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, it speaks across the board, whether you even understand English or not. Just as you say, that musical quality of it stirs the soul.
Absolutely. I remember when I went to Italy the first time, and I started traveling in Europe the first time. The first place I went to was Austria. I don't sing in German.
Yeah.
I went to Holland. I don't sing Dutch.
Right.
I go to Italy. But if you, the artist, are emotionally honest, if you bring emotional integrity to the work, the audience picks that up. They hear it. They understand it.
They feel it.
Understand
it
the
resonates.
They feel it. It resonates with them, and it makes a difference, and they understand it. And so, as you say, music is universal. You know, it has to do with our humanity.
Right.
You know, music is of the spheres, of the atom, of the earth, of the universe, of the cosmos. And those of us who are participants in that have to understand what we are dealing with. It's not a joke thing.
Yeah, well, I really believe that art on a whole is the healing of the nation. You know what I mean? So whether it's music, theater, dance, visual art.
And none of it can exist without music.
That's right.
Theater can't exist without music. Dance can't exist without music. The painter can't paint without music. The writer can't write without music. You lock off the music, everybody dies.
It's so true, because I mean, I don't even have a TV, but there's not a day that goes by that I don't listen to music, so I'd have to agree. And I always say music is medicine. I grew up hearing music my whole life, so I can't imagine a life without music, you know. What would you say is the one thing that has kept you motivated and passionate about your craft all these years? Because, you know, sometimes you may just say, oh, you know, maybe to switch gears. I mean, I think our generation now, it's very different, that they may have 2 or 3 different careers, but you have stood the test of time. What do you think is your driving force? What really drives you? What is that one thing that you think keeps you so passionate after all this time?
The music itself. The music itself. I love music. I love to sing. I listen to all kinds of music. You know, I love classical music. When I was in Beirut, I bought albums of the Arabic singers because their voices fascinated me. You know, I love all kinds of music, and I'm fascinated by all kinds of music because I listen to the classic arts on TV a lot. And when I hear those singers, those classical singers, do some things with their voice, I say, when I come back in the next life, I want to be able to do that. My Lord! You know, I love what I do. I love it passionately. But I love theater. I love the whole theatricality of performing, you know. I love the dance, I love the drama, I love the actors, I love the theater, I'm fascinated by the lighting and how they create the scenery and all of that. You know, what you do to design sets and all of that kind of thing. I love it. I love being in show business. I love my profession. I love my profession.
You love what you do.
I love the people in it.
Right.
You know, I have a great deal of love and respect for my colleagues who are in the profession because I just love the profession. And so there's always something new to do, some new song to learn.
Right.
There are so many beautiful songs out there. People say to me, why you don't write your own song? I don't need to write my own songs because the great songwriters have written some amazing songs. I will never be able to sing all of the wonderful songs that are out there.
Right.
You know, and so I consider myself an interpreter.
Okay. That's a good way of putting it.
I'm an interpreter. I can interpret a lyric.
Right.
I know how to interpret a lyric. I know how to read the poetry of it and to get under the skin of what I think or hope the composer might have intended.
Wants to convey.
Yes. You know, and to bring that alive and to make that live, make those words live. I love doing that.
Okay. So speaking about the stage and the lights and the performance, I don't know, did you ever perform like at the Ward Theatre or anything like that?
Yes, and the big band played at the Ward Theatre, and I performed with the big band at the Ward Theatre. Not in the early days, I mean, you know, subsequently to my coming back to Jamaica. Yes, the big band performed at the Ward Theatre.
And if you were to say, what would you say has been like the highlight? If you were to say like maybe 2 or 3 high points of your career as a jazz musician, what would that be? I'm sure there have been many, but ones that really stand out in your mind.
I think something that was really important for me was when I was asked to, when I had come back to Jamaica, and I'd only been in Jamaica a year or two, and I was asked to represent Jamaica at Cali Festa.
Okay.
It made me feel grounded.
Of course.
It made me feel as though I belonged, and that was important to me.
Okay.
To be asked to represent Jamaica at Cali Festa. And so I think that was probably the first time that I was going to sing with the Jamaica Big Band.
Okay.
That was the first time. And they wanted a couple of original songs, and they had to be kind of Caribbean oriented. And I went to what was JBC at the time, to the JBC library, to look for something traditionally Caribbean, and I found the original of what we call it Yellowbird in Jamaica, but it's really a Haitian song called Shukun.
Okay.
And I found it, and I put it in my repertoire. It is still in my repertoire.
Give us a little sample now.
Jesus way la buakita pekutem. Jesus way la buakita pekutem. Kamwa son yesa mege yala pen. Kawi pijosa depye mwala shen. Kamwa son yesa mege yala pen. Depye mwala shen.
Beautiful. Oh my gosh, it makes me tear up. It's just beautiful.
And so I found that, and I put that in my repertoire.
Yeah.
And then I got my dear friend, who became my very dear friend. Oh gosh, his name was just gone out of my head. But he was a piano player on the North Coast.
Yes.
And I got him to. I told him what I wanted, and he composed a song just for me.
Nice.
And so I had my 3 original songs. That was 2, and then. Feelings had just come out, I think by a Latin American singer, and I included that, Feelings, and I included one verse in Spanish, and Shukun, and the original song that my friend composed for me, and that was my first time singing with the Jamaica Big Band, and it was televised, and that was I think that was at the Carib.
Okay.
That was at the Carib, not at the War Theatre, at the Carib Theatre. And that was very, very special. That was very, very special for me. And just, well, you know, there are a number of big moments. There have been a number of big moments, but those two.
Those two stand out.
Yeah, those two stand out.
Okay, and if you were to pass on words of wisdom for this newer generation coming up. I know you've already spoken about, you know, having a passion for the craft, but what else would you say to kind of guide and direct? Like if I came to you as a young jazz musician now, what would I need to do to really prepare myself or get myself in a position to have the kind of longevity that you've had? Because, you know, we have a lot of overnight sensation. You know?
Well, first of all, you have to listen, because nothing is really new.
Right.
If you want to be a jazz singer, jazz is an old culture.
Right.
It is an old performance art, and everything that has been created has been created. You have to go back and listen to the masters.
Right.
Listen to the instrumentalists. Listen to your Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis and all of those guys that were part of the creative process of the form. Listen to Duke Ellington, who was the big orchestrator. He arranged big band jazz.
Right.
And then you have to listen to the singers. If you want to be a singer, then you have to listen to the singers.
Right.
Go back as far as the singers who sang in Dizzy Gillespie, not with Dizzy Gillespie, but with oh goodness me.
That's alright.
Count Basie and Duke Ellington.
Right.
Listen to those singers who sang with the big bands.
Yes.
And listen to how they sang, how they phrased, the discipline with which they approached the material. Because if you are singing with a big band, it is not a band that is backing you up.
Right.
Big bands don't back up anybody.
Right.
As a singer, you are another instrument in the
joining
band,
Right.
and your part as a voice instrument is very important. That it be correct, that it be exact as the arranger arranged it. You must fit. And so you must know your business, you must know your job.
Yes.
You can't come there and waste people's time.
Yes.
You know, rehearsal is called
Speaks
at
to
2
work
o'clock.
ethic, being on time.
You have to have a good work ethic.
Yes.
You have to have that, and you must listen. You must listen. People, a lot of people believe that, oh, jazz, you can just sing anything. No,
Yes.
it's a very strict discipline.
Right.
You can't just. I am so offended when people talk about, oh, you can just improvise and you can just. No, it's not that.
There's more to it than that.
There's a lot more going on than that. You have to understand the form, you have to understand the structure, and you can only learn it by listening.
Right. Okay, so share with me one of your faves from the past and a jazz musician current that you admire or look up to or respect. Because I know there are many that will look to you as an influencer and as an icon and a motivator for what they do. So who would you say influenced you then, and who are you, would have your eyes on now to say that, demands some attention or at least excites you in terms of what they're doing?
My female favorites were Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan. The most elegant of all of them was Lena Horne. She was just so elegant.
Yes.
I wanted to look like her. One that transcended both popular music and jazz is Natalie Cole. She was by her very age, she was an R&B singer,
right.
but she grew up in her father's house where her father was a musician, and she grew up around jazz. So she was a brilliant practitioner of both the forms.
Yes.
And when she was singing jazz and swinging,
yes.
you couldn't tell that she had any kind of R&B going on, because she could make this shift
right.
so clean.
Yes. Seamless transition.
Seamless. And so she was somebody of the 60s, 70s generation that I think the now generation could look to, because she has the authentic R&B sound, but she also has a good jazz sound that you can listen to and learn from. Most of the young people now, they probably won't want to go back as far as Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan, but I think Natalie Cole would be a good choice for them to start listening to now. And there are a number of other singers that came up around that time that they could listen to if they cared to. For me, right now I'm not really seeing too many. Not too many. I'm not seeing any actually.
Okay.
I'm not seeing any today. Okay. I heard somebody sent me a video clip on my WhatsApp page one day last week of a young singer. I didn't get the name. She was redoing a pop song but restyling it in a jazz context.
Right.
And she was playing keyboard and singing, and right beside her was a trumpeter.
Okay.
Who sounded just like Miles Davis.
Oh, nice.
And I'm going to send that to you. Those are the young people who seem to be looking for fresh inspiration. There are some young people out there, but as I say, if you're really wanting to, if a young person now, somebody in their 20s, looking for inspiration, going back to Natalie Cole would be a good place to start.
Okay.
And then work your way forward from that.
Okay, well, we all know that 2020 has been just a year. So what next? After, we're now December of 2020, so what next for Myna Hague?
I'm writing. One of the things that I'm trying to get off my plate is my late husband's autobiography that I'm editing.
Okay.
And I absolutely intend to get it off my plate before the end of this December, because it's really done. I'm just really putting in some pictures and so on. So I hope to have the manuscript in my hand by the end of the month, or at least the very beginning of January 2021. And to get that off my plate, my own PhD is sitting there, unpublished, which I have to also edit back to get that published. And so those are two projects that are in front of me right now.
Okay.
But I have also started writing, not songs, I'm not going to write any songs. I wrote one song and every time I tried, but I've sung it a couple of times, but I'm not terribly impressed with it.
As you say, let the writers write and
Yes,
singers sing.
yes. Margie Wiley arranged it for me, and it's not a bad little song, but there's some great songs out there still waiting to be sung.
Okay.
But I started writing my mother's life story for some strange reason.
Okay.
Because she has had an interesting life. And I decided, I was discussing it with my brother, I said I want to use my mother's life as an instrument through which or by which to examine a period in Caribbean history. To look at what the social structures were at that time. And to use her story to wend my way through the various periods, and her that whole migratory pattern that took a lot of Caribbean people, but especially the women, to
London and
the
other
UK.
parts,
To the UK, some of them went to Birmingham, some went to Nottingham. Just depends on where they had a connection. Somebody was there and they went to that person. So they went to Birmingham, they went to Nottingham, and a lot of them went to London. A lot of them went up north, to Liverpool as well, to just map that migratory pattern, and then look at how it might have affected their children, and all of that, and then to come right back to the Caribbean to see how they reposition themselves on coming back. Some of them came back, a lot of them never did. So, because she's always talked about her life, and so a lot of it has stuck in my head. So I've already done a couple of pages of historical data, and so on. So that is what I want to do now, to write.
Well, there you have it, singer, writer. So we'll look out for Sonny's memoirs, for your mom's memoirs, and your own. What about your own? Who's writing yours? Are you doing your own? It's a lot of writing.
But that is good. But I feel that as we get older, there are some things that we want to put down on paper.
Yes, because I think you have so much to contribute, and I mean, I've learned so much just from hearing you speak. Even the other day when you shared about the symposium, just sharing your life now with us. There's so much that we've learned, and I think there's a lot that you can pass on to the next generation. So, maybe.
But I'm here. I'm available. My mother always said you're such a chatterbox. I am a bit of a chatterbox.
But that's a Caribbean thing, right? That's our culture, where we share oral traditions to get the information out and to keep the history going.
It's the African in us.
Yes.
Because
African retention.
African retention means that we are oral transmitters of our history, and that's how we know who we are, by going back and looking at our forebears, our foreparents, those people who cleared the path for us to be here. I'd
like you to actually talk about your longevity, because you have singers that come up and they're here today and they're gone tomorrow. So speak a little bit to that, as to your longevity in the business.
Well, as I said before, one of the things you have to decide is what you want to be and how you want to be. And popular music has always been focused on the recording industry, and especially nowadays, especially the last 20 years.
Yes.
So if you are a singer now, you have to make a record, and if the record is not a success, you don't have a career.
Right.
You may have a hit now, and then the next record is not a hit, and you don't have a career. So you have to decide whether you want to be a recording artist or a performing artist.
Big difference.
Because there's a big difference.
Yeah.
So the performing artists can make records, but their career and their life is not dependent on whether the record is a hit or not. And performing artists, when they record, they don't tend to make singles, they make albums.
Okay.
So that their audience has that long amount of music to listen to,
right.
and brings them back to the performance that they were at when they saw the artist.
Right.
And so the popular music is based on singles.
Yes.
And if the single is not a hit, and you make another one, and it's not a hit, and by the time you've made the third or fourth one, the record company will drop you because you're not giving them any hits,
Right.
and they're not going to spend money on you making hits, making records that are not hits.
a hit. So there's a lot of pressure. Whereas a performing artist,
But a performing artist
different.
can be the same person from beginning to the very end.
Yes.
And so for me, I created my persona from day one, who I wanted to look like. You know, Lena Horne was my basic physical image.
Right, your
to start.
prototype. Yes.
My prototype,
Yes.
yeah? And the Sarah Vaughan and those singers who were singers,
Yes.
you know, are still where I find my inspiration, where I have focused my singing. So I'm a performing artist, and any singer who has lasted the test of time have evolved as performing artists, so that even if they started out their careers as pop singers making singles, they have evolved into performing artists who people come and sit and watch and listen to.
It becomes an event.
Exactly. So Cher
Yes.
and all those young singers who started out their careers as pop singers have become concert artists now.
Cher, Celine Dion, you know that.
They are all concert artists because they have evolved into performing artists away from the recording artist's imagery. You know?
And the pressure and constraints of having to record, as you say, an album. And to keep producing hits.
And to keep on producing hits, because after a while, you can't. Because the music is changing.
So drastically.
The music is changing rapidly, and so you can only stay in that up to a certain point. As you yourself get older,
right?
You know, and want to be something more,
right?
You know. You have to evolve. You have to grow, you know, and you take your audience with you. If you're a hit, if you had your hits when you were Celine, for instance, at her first hit, I think when she was 17 or 18, as a teenager, right? And her audience has come along with her
for the ride.
They have grown up, and she has grown up. She cannot be to them what she was to them when she was 17 and they were 17. They are now 40 and 50 and she's 50 herself. So she has to be a different kind of performer. She has to represent them. She has to represent them also, as well as herself. And so you have to become a performing artist. You may not start off that way, but you must become that if you're going to stay the time, the test of time. And that is the story of the longevity. Right. That you must grow.
And we witnessed that through your 10-year anniversary, right?
Of just simply Myna.
Yeah. And you are just simply Myna. Simply beautiful,
thank
simply
you very
elegant,
much.
simply timeless. So we thank you.
You are very welcome. You are very welcome.
All That Jazz with Myna Hague. Thank you for listening, and we hope you've learned something about our history and Jamaican jazz. So, the wonderful lady Myna Hague Bradshaw.
Not that we talked a lot about jazz.